Hey, welcome back to the industry. So happy you decided to join us this week. Hope you had a great 4th of July holiday. I know I did. I spent mine in a small town in Indiana, which small town 4th of July celebration is about as good as it gets. You get all the fireworks you would anywhere else, great food, great crowd, easy to get in and out of. Had a real good time. So 4th of July went off good. And if you're in the snow and ice business, 4th of July should really be of some significance to you, in my opinion. So today's episode, we're going to talk about kind of what those fireworks really mean for you if you're in the snow industry. We're also going to touch on AI again. If you've enjoyed some of the installments with artificial intelligence, talking about Chat GPT, we have another piece of the pie to add in, another piece of the puzzle, based on a conversation I had a few nights ago with a local teacher in Indiana, talking about AI and school systems. Really interesting stuff. Excited to tell you about that conversation. And then lastly, we're going to talk about failure. That's how we're going to round out this show, is by talking about failure. Housekeeping note, got just a couple episodes left of season 1. Season 2 starts in September. So can't wait to see you back here in September to catch a kind of revamped, rebranded a little bit show for, season 2 rather. So let's get down to fireworks. Fireworks start, 4th of July is here. You know, we've been doing RFPs. We've been trying to get new business for the next snow season. 4th of July for me is a big wake-up call for operations. That's kind of what it comes down to for me, is your sales team's been working hard. Your maintenance crew's probably working hard, shutting down everything after postseason is over. And ops has kind of been on a break, especially if you don't have landscaping going on. If you're a snow-only company, ops has been on a break. But it's time for that break to be over. 4th of July, the fireworks, they signify it's time to get off your butt and start thinking about snow again. So 3 things you should be doing, actually 4, because if you do the number 1 thing, which is subscribe to my blog, which can be found at jetfacilityconsultants.com, you would already know this list. But if you are not a subscriber of my blog, the blog is called Talk and Sleep, by the way. I thought that's kind of a slick title for this industry. Anyway, 3 things, right? 1, you need to start having those conversations with your customer. Start talking to the customers you know you're going to have. Little things. Nothing big, just little things. Touching base. Hey, how you doing? Hey, I'd like to schedule a preseason meeting for September. Can we get something on paper, something on the calendar? Hey, I know you signed off on this plow map last year. Does it look good for this year? Or are you guys expecting to have anything coming up in fall or in winter where we might need to change this? We're going to ask you again in October when we do our preseason walkthrough and our inspection. But just so we kind of have an idea, let's talk about that. Start asking some of the questions, right? Start building that rapport early. Your customer's not going to be annoyed by it. They're going to like it. They really will. They're going to like that their snow provider is already trying to talk to them and already trying to set stuff up and get things ready in the month of July, instead of waiting to see if they're going to come around in late October or November for their first appearance of the year. No. Start that now. Get out there and start having the communications that you need to. Everyone always talks about wanting these great relationships. This is where it starts, by having those conversations early and getting things out of the way, getting things into the open air so they can be discussed. It's a much different narrative if you're driving that conversation in July, maybe bringing up some sore points, maybe bringing up some things that you don't really want to talk about in November. But if you're starting those conversations in July, you control the narrative, which gives you power as a provider, which is good, right? Number 2 on the list. Number 2 might be a little biased, but it's true. You need to implement mock storm training. This is the perfect time of year for it. Snow is many months away. Now is the time to do a deep dive when it comes to mock storms and how you operate. Ask the questions. Dig in deep. Figure out if your processes work. Figure out who amongst your snow operations team knows all of these processes and knows all this information that they should. But start preparing now. Start training now. Start running your teams through the gauntlet right now. And don't push it off until that first event comes around. Use this time wisely. Mock Storm's going to help confidence. Mock Storm's going to help ensure that everyone is aware of what's required of them. They're going to know all the plays in the playbook well before the season starts. And you should absolutely be adding some version of this. It doesn't have to be my version. It doesn't have to be my version of the mock storm. It does not have to be that. You can add your own version of mock storm training that best fits your company. I think you would like my version of the mock storm. I really do. And if you're interested in learning more about it, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. Feel free to email me. It's Levi at jetfacilityconsultants.com. Go ahead and reach out. I'd love to talk to you about it. Love to help you. I was at Snowfighters just a couple of weeks ago up in Michigan, operations forum, talking for like an hour and a half, 2 hours about this exact thing. Had a lot of positive feedback from that experience. Had a lot of questions, a lot of follow-up, a lot of interaction, and I love that. People asking questions because they're legitimately curious and interested. But this is the time of year for that. It's the time of year to go through these practice scenarios and start sharpening your team. Last but not least, we talked about meeting and talking to your customers. How about your employees? How about your seasonal employees? Everyone wants to complain about the labor market. It's tough to find labor. Well, if labor is a problem for you, I would highly recommend to reach out to your seasonal employees. Start having the conversations right now. Hey, man, you coming back for this winter? Hey, man, what's your plan? Hey, man, how's it been? How you doing? Everything all right? Maybe you do land work too, and one of your shovel crew guys or an operator or whoever, needs some extra work. Maybe you're able to put them to work for a month or so. Help them out. But you need to have those conversations with your seasonal employees too. And if you use a provider network, talk to your snow providers. At Caliber, back in May, we had a training summit. We invited one of our providers from Indiana to come out to talk to the team. One of the first things he said from a provider's point of view is, hey, like it doesn't hurt anything and it actually strengthens the relationship if you're able to, reach out to these guys in July, in August. Hey man, how's it been going? How'd you make out after everything was said and finished from the last year? You getting any new equipment? You taking on any new geographies? You expanding your area? All good questions. But when companies do that, it makes that provider feel wanted, like the company cares about the relationship. And they care about the partnership and they want to continue it. They want to further the partnership. And that's exactly what needs to happen at this time of year. So 4th of July comes, fireworks, beer, hot dogs, burgers, ribs, and talking to your customers, mock storm training, and talking to your seasonal employees and or sub-supplier network. That's what needs to be happening. And trust me on this, the more work you're willing to put in right now for operations, the more work you're willing to put in August and September to get things straight, because we all know the preseason months of October and November are usually a shit show. They're so busy. You're trying to close land. You're trying to start snow. You have a bunch of things going on. You usually have training. You have client meet. I mean, all this stuff going on. It's chaos. It's busy. It's tough. It would be wise to try to tackle the things that you can in August and September to alleviate some of the stress you're going to have in October and November. But what you do in the preseason directly impacts and dictates how your snow season is going to go. If you're lazy in summer months and you're lazy during the preseason, you're going to have a bad snow season. It's just the way it is. All right, next. AI. We've talked about it a lot. There's a lot of things to talk about. As I meet people, as I get in conversations, I often ask, hey, how about this AI stuff? And, I kind of gauge their reaction, to figure out their level of interest in AI. But more often than not, I find myself having to explain what it is. Not a lot of people out there are really using it. So a few nights ago, was out for drinks and dinner with mother-in-law and her boyfriend, my wife Morgan, and myself. And we end up at this local restaurant, local hot spot, real old place, real cool place. But we were sitting outside. It was a nice evening, having some drinks, having some bar food. And our server just so happened to be a local, I think he said 6 through 12 grade teacher, and was kind of, working a job as a server over the summer months just to get some extra money in the door. And so he kept, passing us, and he would always kind of make the joke that, he would just hear things that were, again, wildly out of context because you're just passing and you happen to hear something. But he said that's one of his favorite parts of the job is, being able to walk past a whole bunch of different tables and get a whole bunch of little pieces of different stories, and then try to, figure out what's going on. But I was, talking to the table about Chat GPT. And, kind of going a little bit in depth, explaining, kind of my experience with it and what I've been able to to use it for, and just different things. Well, anyway, this guy walks past, happened to catch part of what I was saying, so he stopped and we started talking. And one of the first questions I asked, I said, okay, as a teacher, like, how is AI, how is Chat GPT being viewed by public education? And I was kind of prepared for the answer, just by, what you see on the news and stuff. But it wasn't, I don't know, because he made the comment about there's a lot of effort being put in to limit plagiarism, limit people just, copy and pasting direct from Chat GPT and turning it in as their own with no edits, no modifications at all, right? And, I kind of knew that. But the emphasis that he talked about, that he put on just how much effort was really being put in to trying to beat plagiarism. And there was no effort being put in at all to actually educate those on AI or on Chat GPT. So my follow-up question was, okay, like, is there any light in the tunnel as far as maybe an AI course or a Chat GPT course or anything being developed? And he was like, no. He's like, that's not even the best we have right now is just kind of like in our general like technology or IT type of courses or classes, that they might be having discussions about it there. But it's just discussions. It wouldn't be anything, practical. It wouldn't be any true coursework, right? It would just kind of be chalked up to a conversation about current events in the IT tech industry or sector. And, we kept kind of going back and forth talking about stuff. And, I made mention, I was like, to me, there has to be soon, very soon, a course, a class, something to teach these kids really how to use it. It's not just for, forging a research paper or an essay, right? That there's a lot that you can do with this, and, really teaching them how to use it for their benefit. And then I mentioned this before on this show, that Chat GPT and AI is going to give education a run for its money. You very much have to figure out the best way to go about mixing these two together. Let me ask you a question. Is it really important anymore that a student is taught how to put together a research paper, a research project? We all had them growing up. I remember all 4 years of high school, each year in English, having a research paper that was due, usually in the second semester. And it usually, the entire project was over the course of a 6-week period. And that grade for that research paper weighed heavy. It weighed so freaking heavy. And for the longest time, like I just couldn't, I didn't like all the work you had to do along the way. I would just rather do a little bit of research, write my paper, and turn it in. I didn't want to do all the note cards to build your paper. I didn't want to do all that stuff along the way. But the question remains now is that worth, especially when you look at it from a time perspective. Is that worth 6 weeks? I mean, in 6 weeks times 4 years. Is that worth it? When you know that once these kids graduate, they're never using that ever again. I mean, ever. Like you're literally teaching them, I mean, how to type on a typewriter right now. Like typewriter maintenance is what you're teaching, in my opinion, if you're teaching research projects. Because Chat GPT can do it in 20 seconds. The lesson should be, okay, once how can I give this the best prompts to get what I want? And then from there, it's okay, how do I edit it into, again, what I want? Again, there's a lot of unrest when it comes to this AI stuff. And some of it might be for good reason. There is some scary stuff out there. One thing that I've not really talked about as much on this show, but is the scams that'll come from this. Everyone's gotten the email before from some prince in some African country that needs your help recovering all their rubies, but the message is always written in broken English, and it's really hard to even read, let alone believe, right? But with Chat GPT, now these scam emails are going to really sound legitimate. And people are really going to have to pay attention to who sent this email and all this other stuff, because it will get really hard to be able to tell what's going on. But it seems that, definitely the education side of things, but even as a country in general, it seems like we're running in the opposite direction. It seems like we're running to stop this instead of figuring out how to use it. We're spending time on figuring out the best legislation that supports the control of AI instead of just figuring out how to use it. Figuring out how to use it as a government, figuring out how to use it in our education systems and the workplace. For every second, every minute that you spend not using, or at least not figuring out how some of this AI could best serve your company, and on a larger level could best serve your country, you're falling behind. And falling behind is an understatement. Because once you use this, you'll understand just how quickly you're falling behind. And there's countries out there that are spending every waking second figuring out how to add this to their government, to their defense, to their finance, to everything, to make them better. So we just have to make it a priority above all priorities to learn this, to figure out what we're going to do about it, but learn. We have to learn. A scary thing that I heard a while back, and it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you sit on. All right. They recently conducted a survey of Congress, meaning the representatives and the Senate, and asked them, kind of some basic questions of, hey, do you know how to use Facebook? Do you know how to use Twitter? Have you used Chat GPT? Do you even really know what it is? Questions like that. The percentage of sitting members of Congress who knew how to use Facebook, knew how to use simple applications was staggeringly low. It was embarrassingly low. It's my opinion that if you're sitting in a congressional seat, then it doesn't matter your age or anything else, but you're supposed to stay up with the times because you're making decisions based on that. So we're going to have the two bodies of Congress who probably over 60% of which have never used AI, have never used Chat GPT, and really have no idea what it even is. They're going to be the ones telling us how we're able to use it and in what capacity and at what bandwidth. And man, that's a bad way of doing it. It's the wrong way. And it's not going to help us in the future. It's kind of my prediction, you know. Next and last, talk about failing. All right. Failing is the absolute best motivation you can have for your future self. I'm not really talking about failing from the perspective of, oh, you tried this idea and it failed, like like an experiment or like an invention or a business opportunity. No. I'm talking about failing like you absolutely hit total and complete rock bottom. You've lost your job, all your prospects. During your time that you've spent unemployed, you've drained your savings. You've drained any retirement. You've pawned and you've sold off anything that you can. And you've been evicted. So now you're homeless or you're living out of your car. You have no one to borrow money from. And you are completely, just utterly helpless. That's the kind of failure that I'm talking about. That's the type of failure that, if you've experienced it, you should be grateful. Because not everyone has. And not everyone necessarily, deserves to or ever will. But for those that have, or those that might be going through something similar right now, there is hope on the other side. And part of that hope is, if you've experienced failing like that, failing so magnificently bad, you really, that keeps you from repeating it. 6 years ago, I was living out of my car. I was effectively homeless. And, I've kind of told this story before in another episode with Daniel Chismar. We had an episode called Don't Be a POS, a piece of shit. And, we talked about this. So I'm not going to rehash the entire story. But, 6 years ago, I was living out of my car. And as I was able to dig myself out of this hole, as things started to kind of fall to my favor because I was finally working hard enough and putting in enough effort that, now opportunities were coming my way, and I was able to start um, really kind of putting, degrees of separation in between rock bottom and wherever I was. But I was going up. I was moving in the right direction. And now I sit here and my trajectory is still up. I'm still climbing. But it's unnerving to really understand and see how few degrees there are between rock bottom and living the life you want to live. It doesn't take much to end up back in a really, really bad position. And knowing that motivates me. It really does. It motivates me. It doesn't let me become too familiar, too comfortable in a situation. It keeps me trying to reach for more and trying to really solidify different positions and just accomplish different goals that are going to help build even more space in between rock bottom and wherever I am. The other thing failure does is, if you notice when you fail, if you were taking notes and paying attention, you're going to know the types of behaviors or the types of decisions that you made along the way. Or maybe just the general mindset that you had, whatever went in to leading you down that path. You now have the information about knowing that. And so then you can really start to identify that if it ever comes along again. Some days, not often, but some days, at work, I may, not give a project 100%. Some days I might half-ass a little bit. Not necessarily intentionally, right? Just kind of zoning out, going through the motions type stuff. But then, maybe later that same day, maybe the next day, might even be a couple days, I'll notice. And it's not that me, mailing something in comes back to bite me. But as I'm kind of replaying some things through my head throughout the week, I go, wow, I really kind of mailed it in here. Like I didn't do what I should have done. And I catch that. I catch it, and I know that, number one, I need to go back and fix that project if applicable, right? But also, now I've pretty much guaranteed myself that the next 45 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever, I'm going to work without making a single mistake. I'm going to work that like, I just caught my own mistake, and, but I'm not going to allow that to be the status quo. If someone from work were to say, hey, what happened here? They're really not even going to be able to, because my next month, 2 months, 3 months are going to be so spectacular and so good and so extraordinary that you'll never even find that half a day that I did something half-assed. And for that, I have failure to thank, because it's allowed me to build a mental alarm clock for detecting, me being a piece of shit, right? For detecting me going down a road again that I never want to even be on. And that alarm goes off. And I go, oh shit. Need to start paying attention. Need to, stop zoning out, whatever, right? But I need to continue to push. When I started Case, man, I never told the bosses no. I did every single thing that was asked of me all the time. Didn't matter what I had going on in my personal life. I answered to Case. And it was like that for, really, the first few years of my career there. And just, working like I was still as desperate as I was when I started. And it's so nice being able to tap into that mentality whenever I need to tap into that mentality of needing to scrape and to work desperate, to work like this last check I got might be my last check. I'm not saying you got to work like that all the time. I'm not saying that I do. I'm not saying that, I'm intentionally trying to stress myself all the time, but it's there if I need it for extra motivation. I like to think that I don't do a bad job in the first place. Hell, I just got promoted at Caliber. But still, because that's something else that failure has given me, is trying to hold myself to a higher standard when it comes to work, so that even if I fail in my eyes, it's still probably a passable job or even an okay job in my employer's eyes. So if maybe you're going through some failing stuff, or especially if, you've been there yourself, reflect back on it from time to time. Use that as motivation moving forward. It's some of the best motivation that I have. But that's all we're going to talk about that this time. To wrap this up, Snowfighters Forum, Operations Forum in September. I'll be there talking about mock storms. It's going to be, I'm not really sure if it's in Pennsylvania or Jersey. It's close. It's on the border there. All the details are at snowfightersinstitute.com. Go there, check it out for the dates, times, all that stuff. Sign up for it. Again, I was at the one in Michigan. Got to, observe quite a bit, because it was a 2-day thing and my part was only 2 hours. So, got to listen to Neil and Phil for free. And, that's worth it all in itself, for me. So, a lot of good information from them, from me as well. So if you get a chance to come out, sure love to see you. And you can also message me on LinkedIn for information about that as well. Season 2 begins in September. Date still to be determined, but thinking that first or second week of September is going to be likely. And then season 1 will end next week. Next week will be the last episode of season 1. And for all those that have been listening to every episode or has, caught more than a few or whatever, really appreciate your listenership. Hope that you come back in season 2. Really trying to make season 2 be a different kind of show, keeping some of the same elements, but really just trying to rebrand and just kind of redevelop the show into something better for the listeners. That's what we're always trying to do, is be better for the listeners. So really appreciate you tuning in and joining us this week. Until next week, I will see everybody later. Thanks. Bye.